Okay, good evening, welcome. So tonight's halacha is entitled Cosmetic Surgery. We always try and connect it to the parsha. What on earth has cosmetic surgery to do with Parshas Noach? So there is a pasuk in the parsha. If you're listening online, I'll email you the handout, j.golker@gmail.com. The pasuk says, Va'ach es dimachem lenafshosechem edresh. And your blood for your souls I will demand, I will seek. What does that mean? Says Rashi, even though after the Mabul things have changed and mankind are no longer vegetarian, but rather they're allowed to eat meat and therefore you're allowed to kill animals, that doesn't entitle you to take your own life. So it's the prohibition against suicide. Now that posuk is brought in the Gemara in Baba Kama. Why? Because the Gemara in Baba Kama says there is a machlokas tanoim whether or not you're allowed to be chovel ba'atzmai, whether you're allowed to injure yourself in any form. Says the Gemara in Baba Kama, it's at the Aleph on the base in paragraph 2. Ela tnaihi, it's a machlokas tanoim de'ikalamando oma ein odom rishai lachbol ba'atzmai. A person cannot injure himself. Ve'ikalamando oma odom rishai lachbol ba'atzmai. A person can. Says the Gemara, Man Tana Dishmasle, who is the Tana who maintains that you're not allowed to cause yourself any personal injury? Ile Mahai Tanahu, it's a Havamina. Maybe it's the following Tana. The Sanya Aches Dimchem Nafshosechem Edresh, Rabbi Loza says, Miyad Nafshosechem Edresh is Damchem, it's the prohibition of suicide, like I just said. Says the Gemara, maybe that's not a proof. Maybe that doesn't extend to personal injury, because katalashani, there's a difference between killing yourself and injuring yourself, and therefore the Gemara rejects that, and it comes on to other possible suggestions, which is the continuation of the Gemara there. But it's enough of a sort of a platform, a segue for us to discuss this topic, because cosmetic surgery, if you think about it, really it involves personal injury. You're willingly, voluntarily putting yourself under the knife in order to enhance your facial or your bodily appearance. And the question is that allowed? Do we paskin like the mandam who says you can be chovel ba'atzmai, or the other mandam who says you can't? The Rambam, this is in paragraph 3 in Hilchas Chovel Mazik, says, he paskins that you're not allowed to injure yourself, not yourself or not another person. You injure any other person, bein kotten, bein gadol, bein ish, bein isha, whether it's a young, an older person, a man, a woman, derech nitzayon, in this sort of an act of attacking them, it's an injurious act, and therefore he's over a lav shnem lo yosef lahakosei. When the pasuk says that you give malchus to someone, the pasuk says lo yosef lahakosei, you can't give him one more makkah. 39 is the limit. That's if he's been assessed, he's able to take that amount. Says the Rambam in his Hira Torah, if you can't give an extra hit to a chayta, a person who's deserving of malchus, how much more so that you can't hit a person who's a tzaddik, who's not a chayta. So either way, the Rambam, you see clearly, paskins also la'adam lachavoil es atzmei lachbol ba'atzmei, to injure himself. Now, the question is this. If I had a difficult day at school, a difficult day at the office, would I be allowed to come home and if I've got like a sort of a punch bag, but imagine I haven't got a punch bag, I've got a punch wall, and I were to take my fist and sort of just repeatedly hammer it into the wall to the degree that my knuckles are bleeding. Is that allowed? So according to this Rambam, no, I'm not allowed to be chovel ba'atzma, I can't cause myself any injury. But what about if I were to go to, a store and buy some china plates and take them and smash them against the wall, and that just relieves the stress? So, l'chari, it's okay. Why? You're going to tell me it's baltashrius? Well, if I were to instead de-stress by playing squash, and I'd rent a court for $10, $20, and I would rent a squash court, and for 45 minutes I'm running around hitting the ball. That helps me sort of relax, de-stresses me. So what difference is it if I take $10 or $20 and hire a squash court, or I buy plates and throw them against the wall? Bal tashchis is only a problem if it's wanton destruction, if there's no benefit. But if there's benefit, it relieves my stress, then that would be okay. L'chora. So why is it that I can throw china plates against the wall, but I can't punch against this wall, causing myself to injury or causing myself to bleed? What is the difference? So there's a very interesting Rambam and Radvaz. The Rambam in Hilchas Sanhedrin, this is in the second box in number 3, he says, Gezeres hakosov hi she'ein mamisin beistin velo malkin es odem b'das piv el al pishnaim eitim. There's a Gezeres hakosov, says the Rambam, that I can't incriminate myself when it comes to Misa or Malkus, which means if I come to Beistin and say that I ate a ham sandwich and therefore I'm Chayiv Malkus, Beistin cannot accept that testimony. There's got to be 2 Eidim who witnessed that a person ate that nevela, that treif, whatever it was. So too with Misa. If a man comes to Beistin and said, I'm moide that I killed Reuven, Beistin can't kill him on that testimony. You need 2 Eidim and all the everything that goes with it, the Hasra and the Eidim, in order to kill the person. But when it comes to monetary things, you do believe him. When a person admits to owing money, then it's as if there are 100 Eidim testifying against him. So how come we believe him when it comes to money, financial matters, but not when it comes to Misa or Malkus? So the Rambam says, Gezeres HaKosov, it's a scriptural decree, we don't know the reason. Now the Radvaz on that Rambam says, Gezeres HaMelech ve'enon yodim hatam, ve'ef sheloses ktsas tam. Perhaps, says the Radvaz, I can conjecture and suggest, lefi she'ein nafshe shel odom kinyonoi, ela kinyan HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We do not own our own bodies. Our bodies belong to the Rabbi Shalom for the 70, 80, 90, 120 years that we walk this planet. These bodies are gifted to us by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they're not ours. They just house the neshama. Shenema hanafoshes liheina, the pasuk says in Yechezkel. Hilkach, therefore, says the Radvaz, lo yisayel hoida osoi bedover she'ena sheloi, u'malkus palgad demisahu. And malkus is a sort of a partial form of death, and therefore it's not my body to hand over, to come to Beis Din and say, hit me or kill me. But your money is yours. And therefore, says the Radvaz, we say that a person can admit to owing money, and it's kamei eidin domi. It's as if there are 100 witnesses. Etc. And so too with the makas. Okay, so the Radvaz gives that very interesting distinction. Therefore, the explanation is that when it comes to your money is yours, and I can choose to spend it in one way or the other. I can buy china plates, which will relieve my stress if I throw them against the wall, but I can't cause myself an injury in whatever shape or form. There's a famous Maisa with Moshe Feinstein, that when he was a Rav, before he came to America, he was a Rav in Luban in Russia. And the story goes that there was an older man in the community who caused terrible distress to the Kehillah there. He was an ardent communist, and he got the Kehillah into all sorts of trouble. In his last days, he was on his deathbed, and he called the head of the Chevra Kadisha, and he said, look, all my life I know I've caused the Jewish people tremendous stress, and I want to get a kapara. And I ask you, the head of the Chevra Kadisha, that when I'm buried, do not bury me as normal, flat on my back, but bury me like a dog, on all fours. And he passed away shortly afterwards. The head of the Chevra Kadisha went to Moshe afterwards and said, what do I do? On one hand, there's a concept of mitzvah l'chaim divrei hames, to fulfill the wishes of a dead person. On the other hand, halacha is halacha. You've got to be buried according to halacha. Moshe paskant, he's got to be buried according to halacha. You don't listen to him, he's buried normally. Adkan. A couple of weeks later, a delegation came from the government that this man had written to them and had said that the Jewish community hate the communists, and I'm a communist, and you'll see that when I pass away, they'll bury me like a dog to disgrace me and all communists. Dig out my grave, and you'll see this is true, and you should punish the community. Even his dying wish was that. And thankfully, Moshe Paskand, in the way that he did, and it saved the whole Kehillah. But I haven't seen the tshuva, I don't know if there was a tshuva, but what was the underpinning perhaps of Moshe's psak? what underpins it is the fact that our bodies are not ours. It's not for me to dictate how I'm buried. Halacha dictates how I'm buried. And that's exactly the point. So the Rambam paskins also lechabel esatzmai, you can't injure yourself. The Tur brings the Ramah who says Eina halacha ela ha'adam rashai lachbol ba'atzmai, that you can. So it's a machlekas, but la halacha l'maisa we paskin that also adam lachbol es atzmai. Now, there are a few interesting tshuvas just coming back to cosmetic surgery because it's all based on this. The Chelkas Yaakov in Chesed Mishpat Siman Lamed Aleph says the following. This is paragraph 6 on the next page. B'dov shvei losoi v'zel sheinoi im mutla b'sula lasis la'atzmai nituach ala choitem. Can a young lady have a nose operation? Look at in brackets. Can you read those words? Plastic operation. Yeah, plastic operation. Liyasher ul haktina, to straighten or to smoothen the nose. And you do it for sort of to beautify her. That it will enhance her appearance and it'll be easier for her in the parsha of Shidduchim. Says the Chelkas Yaakov. The Mistimas HaRambam HaShulchan v'Tur v'Shulchan Aruch, according to the conclusion of the Rambam and the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, and so to the Gemara in Sanhedrin Parak Daled, Mashma u'mavua lehedya to be'acher pshita to mutala hakizdam v'lachtav evim makom shemitztaya. A person is allowed to let blood. That was a very common practice in Talmudic times, and you're allowed to let blood, which ultimately means you're sort of you're cutting yourself to release and to let some blood, and so too you're allowed to cut away an aver b'mokum shemitztaya when it's causing distress. So you're allowed to, even though we paskin asa lachbol es atzmai, if there is a medical benefit for it, then you're allowed to. Continues the Chelkas Yaakov very interestingly. He says, aside from those reasons which would justify it for a medical reason, in the case of stira, when you see it's when you're in Beis HaKnesses, the osel sosro, you're not allowed to knock down to demolish a shul. But if you're knocking down the shul in order to rebuild it, it's muta. Quoting the Ramon Archaim and Kufnan Beis. V'chein Issa Shabbos. So too, when it comes to Issa Shabbos, if you're destroying something in order to build it, that's not called mekalkel. The body itself is called a binyan, like it says in last week's Sedra, Vayiven es hatzela, when it came to the creation of Chava. Melamed shebon HaKadosh Baruch Hu lechava kabinyan. He built her like a building. Over Shabbos it says goideles or perkeses, also mishum boina. Braiding hair is a problem of boina. Vimkein begufa shel adam nami. When it comes to the actual body of a person, soisa manas livles mikri boina. When you're causing some sort of harm by damaging the nose in order to reconstruct it, or whatever parts of the body we're talking about, that's not called sosa, that's called boina. But we don't have to come on to all that svara, because that it's halacha psuka, that it's muta, cosmetic surgery, plastic operations, in order to for medical reasons, that would be okay. Now, what about psychological reasons, emotional reasons? The beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There's a concept of body dysmorphia, which is a very real issue. I've come across it in the past in various instances, in different forums, and it's something which is very real. And you speak to therapists, and they'll tell you in a school setting, there are all types of things that come your way. And amazingly, Taisus, the first generation of the Bali Taisus were the grandchildren of Rashi. Rashi died in 1105, so we're talking 900 years ago. Tosfos says in Shabbos Daf Nun Amud Beis, Im ein lo tzar acher, if a person only has the distress, shemispayish leilech b'nei odom, that he's distressed to interact socially with other people, that's a consideration. And ein lecho tzar gadol mizeh. Says Tosfos, there is no greater pain than an emotional, psychological pain. It's not a physical pain, but an emotional pain where you can't socially interact with other people because you're embarrassed for whatever reason. So the point is that Tosfos takes on that there is a recognition that psychological or emotional pain is called tsar. And therefore, we can widen our remit. it's not just for medical reasons, but for psychological or emotional reasons, l'chora, cosmetic surgery would be okay. And indeed, Ramosha Paskins, he says, if you look in Chosh Mishpach Chele Beis Samach Vav, the penultimate box of the page, Lochein nir mizeh sheyesh lahatzil nar liyafes atzmo, af shu al yedei chavola. A young lady is allowed to undergo some sort of cosmetic surgery, even though it involves chavola, kiven she'ein derech nitzayin, because it's for her benefit. He's playing on the words of the Rambam, because the Rambam says, if it's sort of a wanton, destructive, harming sort of injury. But if it's for benefit her, then that would be okay. So it seems, on one hand, we've got sources which suggest that for medical or psychological, emotional reasons, it would be permitted. However, there is an important caveat, and that is found and it is raised by the Tzitz Eliezer, the Dayan Waldenberg, who was one of the great poskim in Yerushalayim. And he says in Tzitz Eliezer, in Chelik Yudal of Siman Mem Aleph, he says the following, the last box on the page, Ulam, Im Kanidin Shal HaShari Tzedek. In a case in Shari Tzedek, the famous hospital, he was the posik of Shari Tzedek, Pashat Lahatzir Kafim Min Hagon Shal Yisrael Bazeh. It's Pashat that we allow plastic surgery as described above, for the reasons above. Aval yesh l'daitzi hashlochas l'chidush zeh b'nogel l'nituchim plastiyim shematzoyim ko'es harofim etzel harba b'nei odom l'shem yofi. Sometimes these operations are done for purely cosmetic reasons, for no medical or therapeutic reason whatsoever. L'shem yofi, just for aesthetic. Just for sort of it's enhanced the beauty and for purely cosmetic reasons. There's no medical reason, there's no pain, there's no need medically or therapeutically to do it. The Torah didn't give rishus for the reifa, for the doctor to administer medical treatment for this situation, if it's just to enhance, just for cosmetic purposes. And there's no real benefit for this. We have to believe that there is no artist like Hashem. We say Tzur Yisrael, we refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a Tzur, as a rock, but the Gemara darshans and expounds and says, not Al Tikri Tzur, a Tzaya, that Hashem is not a rock, but a Tzaya, an artist. That every person has been created in exactly with a facial appearance and build and appear and looks that he has or she has. And you can't tamper with that. It's forbidden, therefore, for a person to do so for purely cosmetic purposes. Nor can a doctor administer this, l'shem yofi, etc. I don't want to go more than that. So what emerges in this topic is that whilst there may be precedent to administer operations, plastic surgery, for medical or even psychological or emotional reasons, to do so for purely cosmetic reasons is going to be problematic. Now, there are, of course, grey areas, and how do you define emotional, psychological, what is purely cosmetic? Obviously, it gets a bit tricky. And sometimes, if it is sort of psychological, then in any event, an operation might not be the answer, because if it's all in the mind, then there's sort of a distorted vision of a person himself. That is what body dysmorphia is, really. So it's a very interesting area connected to this week's parsha, because Va'achas Timchem Nafshasechem Edrash is used as a havamina, that perhaps a person can't be chover ba'atzmai. The Gemara rejects that particular pasuk, but there are other sources that the Gemara does bring. The Rambam paskins also l'adam lachbol bein ba'atzmai bein b'chaver. You can't cause any injury to others and even to yourself. And the Radvaz gives that explanation of the Rambam why self-admission for makas is not accepted, and for misa is not accepted, for money it is, because we don't own our own bodies, like the story that Ramesh in Luban tells us. And that's really what the poskim seem to suggest, that chiluk. To do plastic operations, plastic surgery for medical, therapeutic or emotional reasons, l'chora would be okay, but for purely cosmetic reasons would not be.